There is a moment in every life when you decide to rise, to stand taller than your fear, to speak louder than your doubt, to chase the vision that sets your soul on fire. This is that moment, and here we walk it together with stories that awaken, voices that inspire, and truths that set you free. This is Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where hope has a voice, and that voice is yours. And welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Kevin, and Brachelle is here. She's a magical spirit today, and she's not. And I should say this, that for those of you that are listening to this on audio, she'll be normal. If you're watching on video, she's not here. So she's...
I'm here. Surprise. Yes, I figured out my invisibility move today, Kevin, so I'm practicing. But I am more than happy to be here. Whether you can see my face or not, you can hear my voice, and that's all that matters, because today we get to share the voice of Chris Rivers on Positive Talk. He has a website. Go to chrisrivers.com and follow along with us, because he's written a book that is quite ordinary. It's called You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead: Reimagining Wealth, Power, and Belonging in America. So welcome, Chris. Thank you for being here. And how are you?
And first of all, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Brachelle, you said quite ordinary. You didn't mean quite ordinary. You meant quite extraordinary, didn't you?
Yep, exactly that. You know, I just like to make things up as I go, apparently. So just come on, people, catch on. But no, Chris is very extraordinary and doing extraordinary things and having extraordinary conversations about a lot of things that I think we think about quite often.
We do, and it's all part of the human condition that we find ourselves in, that some of us, and Chris being one, are working to help people change their philosophy from one of I can't to one of I can. Would I be correct in that, Chris?
You're 100% correct, and I'm so happy to be here, because I really think positivity and hope are as infectious as negativity and despair. And the more that we can put out hope into the world, the more that we can actually leverage that to create positive change, not just for us, but for everyone around us too.
And positive change is, you know, I have to tell you this. Why is it? And I would love your opinion on this, or both of you actually. Why is it that hate, division, and fear seem to resonate more than, because everybody dismisses positivity as being, oh, that's just positive stuff. Whereas hate, division, and fear, that becomes more real. Why is that? Why do we do ourselves that way?
I'll take it first. I think it really goes down to a sort of scarcity mindset that we created in our culture to say we don't have enough to go around. And when you look at the stats, that's true for millions of people right now. And when you don't have enough to go around, or you feel like you don't have enough to supply for your family, your friends, and I'm talking basic needs, housing, healthcare, food. I'm not talking anything extravagant. When you have millions upon millions of Americans that are in that mindset, and then you have tools like social media that just trigger our emotional dopamine receptors all the time, nonstop, it creates a sort of outrage cycle that just never stops. And then we have a currently economic system and foreign government that hasn't been doing anything to solve those problems. And so despair and negativity just fester in that environment. Whereas if you have a culture and environment where there is more than enough to go around, and it is really an opportunity and land of abundance, then I think you start to see a whole lot more hope and positivity start to circle around. But, you know, we are not in this alone. We are in this in the middle of systems that shape our everyday life. And so that's my take. That's my opinion on why negativity and despair fester so much more. It's a combination of the technology we have, and it's a combination of the scarcity we have.
Yep. And Kevin, you know, I'll tell you that what I was going to say, Chris just told us exactly why. But I was going to say it's because it's easy. It's the easiest of what we know. And so why not just, just rampage through life? Because it's hard when you stop and you have awareness and you have accountability and you have respect and control of yourself and all the things that are damn near impossible in today's world. So we go with what is easy, and that's exactly what Chris just explained.
But that seems so counterproductive because we end up hating somebody that we call the other people that ain't us. Whereas, from my perspective, we are all together. We are all part of the same human family. And Chris, I know that in the book that you've written, which again is entitled, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead, you're talking specifically about the differences between how people tend to think of it in order for me to have, I have to deny you your just due, and to have the same. That just seems like so icky. That's a technical term, icky.
I like it. Yeah, it does feel icky. It isn't when, I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm sure we'll get to this, I'm an evangelical Christian, and I really believe in the message that Jesus brings. And you don't have to believe in Jesus necessarily to believe in what I'm about to say. Page number 1 of the Bible says we're all made in the image of God. And I think that is meant to say we're all in this together. And the 2 commandments that Jesus gives us is love God, love our neighbor. And that second commandment is not given with conditions. It's not say, love your neighbor only if they believe what you do. Love your neighbor if they only have what you have. Love your neighbor if they have the same skin color as you. Love your neighbor if they love the same way as you do. Like those conditions aren't there. And that was a message from 2,000 years ago. Whether you believe it's divine or not, like this has been part of human culture, that we actually should all belong to each other and we shouldn't be dividing ourselves up into these groups. But yeah, we tend to do it over and over and over again. And it's something I think we're going to have to be working on for as long as humankind is around.
And Chris, I don't know, and for those in our audience, whether you are a follower of Christ or not, and I would love for you to read the text of the Sermon on the Mount, because if in my framework, that virtually says it all. Take care of each other. Be kind to each other. Take care of those that are less fortunate than you. We've got 40 million people in this country, predominantly children, who go to bed hungry every night. That's not how we should be rolling in the greatest country in the world. And so, I mean, there's lots of things that we can talk about like that. But I love the premise of your book. I love how did this book come to be?
It's such a great question. This book started as a personal mental health journey. And let me explain that just a little bit. I ran for state office in both 2022 and 2024. And in the middle of that, between the 2 races, I knocked on over 9,000 doors. And by talking to people, doing the uncomfortable work of going up to people's doors and talking to them about politics, only to see what ultimately happened in 2004, the outcome of the election, and realizing that the conversation I was having with people, whether they're MAGA supporters, liberal, progressive, don't follow politics at all, and the conversation our nation was having were so disconnected, it was hard to believe. And then to see the outcome of the election of how we chose President Trump for a second time, I just started to write down how I thought we got to now. And it started with writing down my personal journey, which I never really did before. And then it went into more of the policy analysis that spans 40 years or more of history of how we got to this moment. And then wanted to put together some ideas of how can we come out of this? What's the actual solution? And I just put it all down on paper so I could think through it and get it out of my own head and start to wrap my head around it. And then I started to share it with some of my friends. And they said, wow, this is at a moment where a lot of people on my side of the aisle were feeling despair, and many still are. They read it and said, this is meaningful and this should get out to a wider audience. So then that started a year-long journey to get it to the state that it's in now, where you don't have to be a policy wonk to pick it up. It's written in a way where anyone can pick it up, read it, and get the basic facts that they need to understand the current moment.
And by the way, Rochelle, I want to thank Chris for running for office. He's a better man than I, because he knocked on 9,000 doors, and it wasn't like everybody was really excited to see him when he showed up at their door. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know what you mean. I had a window sales job, and I lasted about an hour. I knocked on 3 people's door. If you don't want these windows, then I don't want to talk to you. Gotta go. And you know what? If not both of you, better than anything we've got Chris, who has this message, who has this understanding, who has the human side of him. That understands that we're all just people. And I think really when it comes down to the world, that's what we forget, is we're all human. That's literally the point. We're supposed to learn life. We're supposed to have these experiences, and we're supposed to have each other. And Chris, through writing the book, which is now everybody available on audio, he did it himself, he told me. So if you want to be able to listen,
which makes him a better man than me.
Yes, you can go listen to that, which was quite a breaking out of his shell thing for him. So go appreciate listening to being able to hear him in his own words tell the story itself. And I love that you've brought it together in a way that brings us together. It's not a perspective, it's not a motive, it's not an opinion. It's something that any and everyone can pick up and read, and it'll make them realize, hey, maybe I could use some of this in my own life. And is that how you kind of felt that you wanted people to get out of it as you were writing through it? Like, what exactly went through your head? Did you change a lot of the way you were originally going to have it all be heard?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And just to be clear, I recorded the audiobook. It's getting processed in the background, so it'll be available in March, which is totally fine. So it will be available, so stay tuned for that. But I really wrote it, and my audience I was really writing to in my own head when I first wrote it was myself and my family members who grew up in a sort of lower income, lower middle class, at least, town in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And the framing, the big points never really changed. The sort of thing that an editor really brought to the forefront is bringing more personal narrative into each and every part of this. So each and every chapter starts with a personal story. It ends with a personal story about what that chapter is about. And then in the middle is sort of like what you really need to know. And It was really empowering for me. I was at a family function, and most of my family, we haven't talked about politics at all for most of my life. And to see my aunts come up to me and have them say to me, hey, I finally understand economics at the national level and like why it's important in politics. And these are my aunts who like have been taking care of me since I was a kid and like family outings and stuff, who just never wanted to ask, like, how does this actually work? And, you know, I really wrote it hoping that people would take away a sense of hope that they could be part of the change. Because once you understand the decisions that got made, whether they were 40 years ago or yesterday, that are leading to the dysfunction we're seeing today, then it should be empowering, I hope, for more people to say, I could be part of that solution. If you want to run for office, we have 600,000 elected positions in this country. If you want to just talk to your family members you haven't talked to in 10 years since MAGA came out, hey, like there's actual practical advice on how to talk to your neighbors. There's, you know, if you're an artist, there's advice on how to make art for this moment in time. So yeah, at the end of the day, the big points really didn't shift. Some of how I told the story shifted slightly, but the ultimate goal is to have people leave reading the book with a sense of hope and empowerment to be part of that change, because no one person, elected or otherwise, can do it. It's going to take millions of us.
Yeah, that's amazing, Chris. And Kevin, I found your next job. Dun, dun, dun.
Which is?
Did you hear how many positions are open for electors?
Oh, I the problem that I would have.
I'm just kidding. I know.
And by the way, the name of his book again is "You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead: Reimagining Wealth, Power, and Belonging in America." And that is a big conversation all by itself. And we need to take a break real quick. I wanted to play this because I think it's important. And Rochelle, do you know what I'm going to play?
I think so. Chris, you'll have to tell us what you think when we come back.
Sounds good.
and we'll be right back. Here's another point to ponder by Positive Talk Radio. Look at the world today. We see conflict, poverty, and division driven by the tragic illusion that my people are separate from yours. This belief in separation is the single greatest obstacle to peace. The truth is, humanity is a single global body. When one part of that body, a child in poverty, a family fleeing violence, is in pain, the entire system suffers. We cannot truly be well while our brothers and sisters are wounded. There's no us and them in this body, only us. Our sacred responsibility is to move past labels and see the shared light and common dignity in every single person on earth. Justice, for one, is justice for all. Compassion, for one, is compassion for all. This is the blueprint for global survival. We are one global family. Let empathy be our border, and let love be the only banner we carry.
I knew it.
I knew you knew that. And Chris Rivers is with us. And Chris, what did you think of that particular piece?
That just resonated so much. You know, my personal story. So I grew up in Connecticut, never really traveled more than an hour outside my hometown just to enlist in the Army after 9/11 and find myself in the middle of Iraq. And the thing I learned there, regardless of language, regardless of culture, regardless of religion, we're all human beings and we all basically want the same thing. Like what I saw in Kuwait, what I saw on my trips into Iraq was that like people there were kind of doing exactly what you and I would do if we were in that same exact situation. And then fast forward when I became an Army officer leading troops in Afghanistan, same thing. Tribal culture in the Pashtun part of Afghanistan, different culture, different language, but we're able to connect on a human to human level. And when bad things are happening to them, it impacts all of us. And we can certainly imagine that as Americans and how much we have in terms of hurt and suffering here in our own country. But when you expand that out to the rest of the world, it's a real tragedy, I think, because we're all on this planet together and we're all human beings together. And the fact that we drew so many of these lines to keep us separated and inflict so much harm, it's something we should all be working to solve.
You know, what's interesting about that, too, is that the astronauts, when they go up into space and they're looking at the globe, they don't see any borders. They don't see the differences. What they see is one planet, and we're all here on that planet. We have taken the opportunity to subdivide ourselves into rich, into poor, into different colors, into different religions, and all of that. And I don't know that how much of it serves us. And I'm glad you've written this book because you're right. What is happening now goes back 40 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on? What happened 40 years ago, Chris, that made fundamental changes in our society?
Yeah, so to answer that, let's go back a little bit further to right after World War II. In the 1940s, say 1945 to the 1980s, we had a philosophy as a country at the national level that said, we want to use government to regulate business, to provide a social safety net, to educate people, to actually invest in the middle class and have people be able to live meaningful, impactful lives and have a work-life balance and all. And we put policies to those ends through the GI Bill, through other investments we made. And we saw this mass compression where we still had rich people, we still have poor people, but it was pretty well compressed together. And then the 1980s come along and there's a different philosophy that says, hey, some people are just better than others. They're better at making decisions. They're smarter. They're more intelligent, whatever the case may be. And that we should be using government to empower those people. And the rest of us will benefit from their guidance. And Ronald Reagan and his team come into the White House and say, let's put that into law. And so that's when you start seeing the tax transformations that say, we're going to dramatically reduce the highest tax rates in this country for the rich people down to something that, to the point where today, the billionaires are paying less in taxes than their secretaries, which is insane. We also get laws saying, hey, health insurance should be for profit instead of nonprofit. We get laws saying corporate companies get to buy back their own stock instead of investing back into their communities. We get laws that say if you're the CEO or board member of a publicly traded company, you are legally required to only care about the shareholder interests regardless of anything else, from employee wages to investments and long-term health of your companies and the communities in which you operate. And so we institute by law an era of shareholder supremacy. And it all stems back to this fundamental philosophy difference. And most people, I don't think, ever connect the dots. And then you say, hey, shouldn't politics actually correct this? But then all of a sudden you start seeing Citizens United and other Supreme Court decisions that make money incredibly influential in politics that then helps sustain this incredibly unequal economic system. And it didn't happen overnight. It took decades for it to get this bad. But if you look at graphs, you can go back to the 80s and see basically all the lines just completely diverge.
Okay.
And go ahead, Michelle.
I really want to ask this because there's somebody asking through me somehow. And this is probably in your book, Chris, but I'm wondering you mentioned policies, like what immediate policy changes have you come across that you think that we need? And how would we even start to initiate some of those things for like just beginning change of something that could be bigger and so much better?
I think we need about 3 hours to answer that question.
No, just like one pinpoint. I'm just curious.
Yeah, if you want the rapid fire answer is we could put into law to get money out of politics. We have done it here in Connecticut for state level elections, and that would do more than almost anything else to level set the playing field once again.
Interesting.
The slightly longer answer, and promise, Kevin, it will not be 3 hours. If you read the book and you ultimately agree with the whole economic argument I'm making, and I think it's a pretty solid argument, and if you agree with the political argument that I just described, and then what we have left to fight over is this sort of sense of what does it mean to even be American, hence the culture wars, and hence how some politicians weaponize that in order to keep getting elected. Well, then the actual solution, because it goes in that order, the economic system was thrown out of balance, politics have been used to reinforce it, and then we're left over with this sort of belonging. Well, in 2024, more people did not vote than voted for either major candidate. Over 90 million Americans did not vote. And so the actual path to fixing it is basically create a movement outside of traditional political operations to get those people engaged, get them excited, show them that there is something worth voting for. And if you could bring 1 in 10 of those folks to the next federal election, that's 9 million votes. You will change politics for the rest of our generation. And then you use that political power to do things like get money out of politics. You do things like start rewriting the laws to actually re-incentivize the economy to have the same incentives we had before the 1980s as a way to correct this all. And then you'll see people realize that government could actually be used to make their lives better. And that will be reinforcing in the same way that has been reinforcing for the billionaires to basically own the system for the last 40 years.
Interesting.
And Brichelle, I'm curious to know, and I'm willing to bet Chris has heard this name. By the way, Chris, that was very concise and very good.
Yes, thank you for that.
And but Brichelle, have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Jack Kemp?
Yes.
You have?
Yes, I've heard that name, probably from you.
Jack Kemp, way back when Reagan was president, advocated for something called, and there are people still using this term today. Mm-hmm. And have you ever heard the term trickle down economics?
Yes, quite often.
And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the basic premise is you give lots of money to the people at the top who have got the ability to do things like, build factories and increase investments and to do stuff. And the results and the prosperity will trickle down to everyone else.
Like a funnel. Wrong.
Yeah, but none of that. And Chris, I would love your opinion. What do you think about trickle down economics? Is it as big a farce as I think it is?
It's a bigger farce than you think it is, and here's why. That basic logic that you just described and I've been describing here is the underpinning of every large tax cut that the rich people have gotten in our country over the last 40 years, and they're happening more often. They happened under this administration, the current Trump administration, Trump 1.0. They happened under Bush. They happened under Reagan. And here's the thing. When Reagan first did it, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who had to do the calculations to figure out how much money they would actually save and how much economic value they would generate, their own economic models that they ran on 1980s level, like punch card computers, said it wouldn't do that. And then they changed the models to make it do that. And they admitted to it in their own memoirs.
Oh my God.
And the quotes in the memoirs are in my book, so you can go read it for yourself and look it up. But they knew it from the get-go that it was never going to do that. And then we have, I forgot how many tax cuts that the rich has benefited more than anyone else. And it has never led to what they promised. Every time that this is on the docket for Congress to vote on, you have CEOs around the country lining up and say, we'll invest and build this factory. We'll create tens of thousands of jobs. And it never happens. And so not only do we know it was messed up from the beginning and they knew it, we have 4 or 5 different national case studies ourselves. And by the way, as someone who has done diplomacy work in other countries, every other country has tried this. It hasn't worked as well. So not only do we have like 4 or 5 case studies in our own country, there are countless case studies around the world now where it has never worked. And that's why it's a bigger farce than I think most people realize.
Damn. We need to figure out how to all just be rich. So nobody's fighting.
Well, and the number of billionaires that are in this country has risen to an alarming level, and the number of people that are not in the middle class anymore, because the middle class is shrinking, and the lower classes are expanding. It's inconceivable. By the way, I wanted to thank you, Chris, for your service. And
Yes.
we may be the only country in the world, because I know you were in Iraq during the Iraq War, and we may be one of the few countries that we will go to war and we do not share the burden equally. And let me back up a little bit. In World War II, and I have a couple today. There were pennies. Now we don't make pennies anymore, but there were pennies that were made of stainless steel, because they were taking all the copper and they were making bullets out of it. There was gas rationing. There was women were going to work as Rosie the Riveter, because we had pulled together as a country because we had been attacked by Japan and also by Germany. Now we went to Vietnam, and now that was a draft. Other than the people that were affected by the draft, the running the up and down the street American was not affected by it. The Iraq War, we were not affected by it, nor did they increase taxes to pay for it. So we ended up going deeper into debt. Now our debt's $40 trillion. This is not sustainable, is it, Chris?
It is definitely not sustainable. If you look at our debt graph as a country, it looks like a hockey stick. It is just going up exponentially now. And we paid for most of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars basically on a national credit card that we are paying interest on. And no one knows how much debt we could take on before creditors really start calling it into question. But the fact is that we keep adding more onto the heap. And it's not sustainable, because if you look at the largest numbers, you have to look at, we on a typical year as a country bring in between $4 and $5 trillion in tax revenues, and then we spend somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 trillion. This is an oversimplification, but we're operating in such a deficit. And then what do we do every time we get a chance to is we give tax cuts and take in less revenue from the people who can most afford it, while burdening the people who can least afford it more and more and more by cutting food stamp benefits and other things. And yet at the same time, from 1980 till now, corporate profits have doubled. Like their gross profit margin have doubled. And so corporate profits in an annual year are about $4 trillion. And if they would have kept the same profit rates we had in 1980, that should be about $2 trillion. So literally we're paying a corporate tax to corporations to the tune of about $2 billion. And if you go back to what I just said a few minutes ago, government takes in about $5 trillion, spend about $7 trillion, and then we pay $2 trillion extra in corporate profits. Like, if you want to start plugging the holes and make this country financially sustainable for generations to come, we're going to have to talk about that at some point.
Yep.
Rochelle, any thoughts?
Oh man, I'm just hoping that Chris gets his butt out there and does some work and gets voted for, because I think about my kids and their kids and what is to come and what was before me and how much it really has changed. It's like, seriously, we've gone from one extreme to the other. I can see the hockey stick in my family just by looking at our generations and what we've experienced and how life has been. And really, I think it comes down to, we just need to simplify life back to what its roots and its meaning is supposed to be and what we are as humanity. And that's where it's all going to start. So that's why we're here doing this with you, Chris. And I'm thankful that you get to spend this time with us and so much knowledge. All of what you've said, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around. But thank goodness we have him here to do it, huh, Kevin?
Oh, no question about it, because we have got to make fundamental changes in our society and in the world. One of which is, there are people in this country who believe that healthcare is a privilege. And there are other companies who believe that healthcare is a basic human right. When we come back from this break, I'm going to ask Chris what his opinion is. And one of the things that sadly we are sorely lacking in our society right now is the I word. Rochelle, do you know what the I word is?
I've heard of it.
Do you know? Well, it's integrity. We'll be right back. Here's another point to ponder from Positive Talk Radio. What is the easiest thing to justify? It is a small transgression. The one no one will ever see, no one will ever know. The tiny exaggeration on the expense report. The extra minute you took on your lunch break. The packaging you tossed in the wrong recycle bin because it was closer. In those moments, the question isn't, will I get caught? The question is, will I know? It isn't about avoiding punishment. It's a silent agreement you make with yourself when you choose to do the right thing. To return the wallet. To fix the mistake. To respect the empty space. You aren't impressing the world. You're earning your own respect. That small choice, made entirely in private, is how you build a life you never have to look away from. The only audience that matters is you. And welcome back to Positive Talk. My name is Kevin. Rochelle is here, and Chris Rivers is here. Rochelle, he's got a book out, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. People go check it out. He's got it on his website and all the other places. But from his website, you can see chrisrivers.com. You shouldn't have to kill to get ahead. Reimagining wealth, power, and belonging in America. And thank goodness for you creating this book, Chris.
Thank you.
It is one of those books, and it's just come out now. How long has it been out now?
About a month.
Congratulations.
And have you gotten any early reviews, any takes on it yet?
I've gotten some amazing reviews. We have, I think, 25 to 30 reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and
Already?
anyone can go read them. Absolutely.
Wow, that's good. That's great.
I think the book is really hitting a moment, I think, where a lot of people recognize that what is going on cannot be the answer moving forward, but a lot of people are looking for what is the answer. And our political apparatus on either side of the political aisle haven't been really good in our country at providing holistic answers to solve people's problems.
I would love for you to talk about elections and what the Supreme Court did, how that upended the ability for the little guy, the guy who's got great ideas, who's a terrific leader, but he doesn't have the NRA in his pocket, or he doesn't have deep pockets to spend. How can he even get elected? You've run for office twice. Thank you, by the way, for that. And but it was really hard for you to all of our elected officials today, correct me if I'm wrong, spend a great deal of time raising money. Is that true?
We have to define all of the elected officials because there's 435 members of Congress, there's 100 senators, and then there's obviously one president, one vice president. And then there's about 600,000 other elected officials across the country, local, county, state officials, and they cover the gamut. Different states have different rules. Here in Connecticut, we actually have laws that allow for publicly financed state level elections. So all of our state legislatures here, people running for governor, can be publicly financed, and they don't have to spend the same time fundraising as everyone else does. But all that to say, the spirit of the question, I think, is spot on, which for Congress, for the U.S. Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, your typical member will spend up to 70% of their time fundraising. And that is all because of really two different Supreme Court cases. The one that everyone knows is called Citizens United. And what that effectively did was say, if you're a company or if you're a rich person with a lot of money and you want to spend on a campaign, as long as you don't directly coordinate with an individual candidate, you can spend however much money you want and you don't have to disclose who is donating to you. And that gave rise to what people in politics call dark money, or you might hear the term called super PACs. And what these super PACs do is allow people with a lot of money, corporations, rich people, basically, to donate however much they want to whatever candidate interest they want, and they just run it as issue ads. And what that has done is basically created a system where 97% of the candidates who win have more money than the other side. And so if you want to stay in office to try to do some good work, you have to then try to fundraise. And that creates a system where if you think the bad guy connected to a billionaire is trying to win a seat to do bad things, then you have to go find a good billionaire to find and like offset your election so you can try to do some good things. And I don't think the way to fight a bad guy with $1 billion is to go find a good guy with $1 billion, because at the end of the day, if you have $1 billion, your interests are different than people who are working for a living. And that's part of the problem. And if you look at a graph, which I have in the book, of how much money we have spent on US federal elections, super PACs in the 2024 election make up well over 50% of the money total spent. And we don't know where that money came from. We don't know how that money got spent. And so it even opens up the doors to foreign influencers coming in. And there's nothing really stopping a Russian oligarch from donating to the NRA, for example, and then the NRA spending on US elections. And I don't think that's what we want our election system to be based on, because if it continues to be based on that, then the political process will continue to do what it's currently designed to do, which is answer to the needs of people with enough money to donate to elections.
So if we're wanting to get the good guys and bring them forth and allow them to be heard, what needs to change to allow them to have a voice?
So two things. The policy solution is just to make it illegal to do that. We
Right.
could do publicly financed elections at the national level.
Mhm.
We could do term limits to create more churn, in which I would happily support. The other answer before we get there, though, is more people have to show up to vote, and you have to show up to vote for more elections. And I hate to put this back on all of us working class folks who are working for a living, but think about it this way. In our country, we love sports. And a ton of people who love baseball, for example, love to follow the minor league teams because you get to see where the future stars are being made.
Right.
Yet in our politics, we only love to talk about the federal level. We love to talk, and most people love to like hate on Congress. Like the approval rating overall for Congress is at an all-time low, and probably rightfully so. But not enough people are realizing with all the money at the federal level, it's hard to influence it right now. But most state level elections are decided by tens of votes, hundreds of votes. If you got your entire family to show up to vote, you could change an election if you found a local candidate who you thought was interesting, who might have something different than what your local area has. And coming up through local politics, state politics into the national scene is the normal path. And so you can view it as someone who has power to vote in different states, that you get to basically choose the minor league team as those people develop the skills of doing interviews, doing media hits, running campaigns. so that in a couple of years they could be the real players looking to go pro at the federal level. And we have an awful lot of power still because there isn't enough money to go around for rich people to influence every county, every state level election we have.
Well, that's positive.
Yeah. And why do you think it is? Because there are countries on our planet who are recently getting the ability to vote, and that is a very, very important prized thing, to have a legitimate vote. Why do you think it is that we have so much apathy around elections in this country?
I think it's a couple things. One, we have an economic system that constantly tells working class people that you don't matter as much as rich people. Like, that's kind of everywhere in our culture. We also have these structural things that we built into our system from our founding, like the United States Senate, with what was the Connecticut plan, by the way, to distinguish small states versus large states. But the Senate, even when Republicans have a majority in the Senate, they represent millions fewer Americans than the Democrats do, but yet they have the power. And then we have the Electoral College at the presidential level, which is based on that same compromise, which gives people who live in more rural states more electoral power. And so and it cuts both ways, right? If you're a Republican that lives in California, you feel like your vote for president really doesn't matter, and kind of doesn't. If you are a Democrat who lives in the middle of the country somewhere, you feel like your vote for president doesn't matter. And because we have this winner take all system, which, by the way, is not in the actual Constitution, but we adopted it because Thomas Jefferson wanted to win his whole state of Virginia, didn't want to split votes so he could become president back in the day. So this also had gone back for quite some time. It's not necessarily new problems, but we built these structures to not exactly be incredibly fair, but we can also get rid of them. We can do it differently.
Well, as an example, the U.S. Senate, we'll talk about them for just a second.
Sure.
Because if you are in North Dakota,
yeah.
There are 700,000 people who live in the entire state of North Dakota, and they have 2 senators.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 senators have got, because in California, that has 40 million people, they get 2 senators too.
Yeah.
So North Dakota has got an undue influence over our elected, over the Senate, versus somebody that's got 40. That's what you're talking about, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yep.
And so now the House is a little bit different because that is more proportional, but the Senate should also be more proportional. But I'm not sure that the House is really all that proportional because of the gerrymandering and the rigging that they do around the elections. So how would you solve all of that?
So I don't know if you could really realistically get rid of the Senate and the system. I think there is some benefit to it, but the gerrymandering we could absolutely get rid of. And the reason why I think we could get rid of it is some states already have. States like Connecticut, the districts largely follow county lines. Some states choose their districts not through the political leaders in those states who have to use those districts to get elected, which is what the standard is. You can have nonpartisan citizen election panels decided on their own. You could have more strict definitions. And then I think what isn't being talked about enough yet is basically that I think we need more members of Congress. That's counterintuitive, but it being capped at 435 was also a power move from back in the day. And the fact that your average US representative represents over 700,000 people isn't exactly how the system was meant to be. You should be able to know personally who your congressman is or your congresswoman is, and you should be able to talk to them. Right now, if you represent 700,000 people, the member of Congress kind of always has an excuse not to talk to you, because how do you know if the 699,100,000 other people don't disagree with you? And so at the end of the day, I think we need to increase the number of members of the House. We need to have citizens, nonpartisan commissions draw the maps. We need to have very strict standards on review, because when we had parts of the Voting Rights Act enforced that required an extra level review for different maps, you didn't see this stuff playing out. And once the Supreme Court got rid of those provisions, it all came right back. So we have already figured out in our country how to not gerrymander, but we haven't figured out is how to make that the new normal.
Rochelle?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that there's really so much that we can do. Like, all I'm hearing Chris explain is all of our options, everything we can do, how we can come together, what we can talk about, the way that we can be heard. And it's exactly right. People don't vote. Why? Because they don't feel like it matters. And it doesn't matter because we're not voting. And so everything is kind of fighting against itself. And just by us changing our perspective, it could actually change the outcome, because how we see it and how it's become. But there's just so much that we can do. And I think we need to sit back and say, maybe we could all at the same time, like, just agree that on the same day, we're on, let's say, July 4th, we're all going to write a letter that will get to Congress and will be heard. Just trying to bring awareness and start a movement of people having power and being important in growth as a community, as a system, as a country, but also individually, what we're going through, how we care about each other, and what our lifestyles really are like. And as Kevin mentioned, it is a reality. There's children who go to bed and they don't have beds to go to bed. And that's here in the US. And I think we have become the third world country, and it's time we come together and see how much we can do when we do come together.
What's it going to take? Is it going to take us going farther down this rabbit hole that we seem to be on?
Oh Lord, please no.
Or are people going to wake up and say, and is there a movement that we can help you create that says everybody needs to vote? If what would happen, what would happen, Chris, if everybody voted?
Yeah,
all the current players would be scared out of their minds, because there would be huge changes that would take place. Don't you think?
Let's try it.
I absolutely think that's true. And actually, in my book, and one of the appendices I have is called A Fair Deal for America, which lists out what I think the path forward should be from a policy perspective. But also in there, embedded in that, is a list of policy ideas that 2/3 or more Americans agree on, and they haven't been enacted yet. Things like getting money out of politics, having common sense gun reform, overhauling our electoral process to be more fair. Like, all these things, 2/3 of Americans or more want, and that 2/3 mark is the magic mark in the U.S. Senate for another reason that goes back to the sort of Civil War time period that we don't need anymore, called the filibuster. But not to go down that rabbit hole. At the end of the day, I really think there is a movement happening. People are starting to wake up, whether it's because of what they see from ICE and Border Patrol, whether it's because they see everything they're buying being more expensive when this administration sold a promise of making everything less expensive. I think some people are starting to wake up. What I am trying to do is, with the book and with the speaking opportunities, interviews, and also my own YouTube channel, which you can find through my website, I also want to start teaching people how this stuff works, so that, because let's face it, at the end of the day, we have done a pretty terrible job in this country of teaching people civics in a way that they can be empowered. And I want to help fill that gap in a way that is not judgmental, in a way where anyone can come from wherever you are, and I will try to meet you wherever you're at, however educated or not educated or whatnot. There are no stupid questions. And I'm trying to answer those questions right now. And I would love to build that out into an academy, because at the end of the day, I think just people need to understand how these dots connect. And once you do, people, I think, will get fired up to be part of the change. And the call to action for all of this is, one thing you learn in diplomacy is choosing not to do anything is also a choice. And people have been choosing that for a long time. And I get people are struggling. I get people are living paycheck to paycheck. And how am I going to fit this into my overall schedule? Well, the other sort of frightening facts that people should know about is we have more economic inequality now in the United States than France did, which led to the French Revolution. We have more economic inequality now than what led to the Great Depression and World Wars. The system will self-correct. Unfortunately, that usually comes at an incredibly high price of human life. And what I'm trying to teach people is we don't have to go there. We don't have to let it get that bad. If we just know it's going that direction, the option to sit back and say, I don't have the time or energy to do anything, so I'm going to choose to do nothing, kind of becomes a choice that most people don't want to take. And so in trying to reach out to people who might be waking up to the MAGA movement and coming out of it, there's leavemaga.org. And I am like also talking to people in my own life. But in addition to that, for people who are not just trying to come out of MAGA, for people who have been on the sidelines for a long time, or you just don't know enough to talk to your friends and families about it, I'm trying to build a platform that will teach people exactly what they need to know so that they can be part of the change moving forward. And I think that's how we build a movement, because if people can come join along and help build that, help guide it, then it's their movement. It's not just my movement. And I think that's how we become a sort of unstoppable force in politics to be the change that we're talking about.
And it's based on facts.
Yes.
I love that, Chris.
Yeah, and speaking of which, do you remember the gal who, the queen who said, "Let them eat cake"?
Maria Antoinette.
Well, yeah, she lost her head over that one.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And that is, but change sometimes is hard, but it requires all of us. And of course, you've also heard, Chris, that elections start at the local level. And when you are not participating in the primaries and you're not participating in what they call off-year elections, then a minority of us are picking the people that are running the country. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. I really think we have to get to a point where we are no longer saying there's off-year elections. Most places in this country have an election every year. It might be state, might be local, might be county, might be federal. There's an election all the time. The more you show up to vote, the more power you have.
And we are giving up our power to a minority of people who are more dedicated or driven, like the MAGA folks have been in the past. Like 30% of the electorate or so is strongly that. And you know, we talked in our pre-interview, you talked on a bunch of doors and you talked to all kinds of different people. They were pretty immovable in what they believed, and it wasn't even the truth what they believed, because they heard it on Fox News. I also think there needs to be journalistic standards, that if you don't tell the truth and you tell an opinion, it needs to be clearly labeled. This is my one man, one person, Sean Hannity, opinion, and not a matter of general fact. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we had that as a rule in this country up until 2004, when there was a federal court case in Florida where, lo and behold, Fox News sues to try to turn their own program from a program of journalism that had to adhere to journalistic ethics to one that is purely entertainment. And then all of the other cable news and network news quickly changed their internal policies to say, we're not really news, we're entertainment. And so our country, if you feel like you're watching entertainment when you're watching cable news, it's because you are. And I really think, in my opinion, we should have a Surgeon General warning on all of cable news as long as this is existing, and saying, this may be bad for your health, it's entertainment, like enjoy it if you want to. And people can choose to watch it or not, but you should also be able to have a badge that says this is actual journalism and we're holding up journalistic ethics, so people can get back to having a similar fact base. And by the way, I think we also need to have rules about social media and what AI is allowed to generate, what these algorithms are allowed to add into your feed from people who are not your connections. The amount of foreign influence on social media is deeply alarming. We should be able to regulate that in a way so that people, when they're getting their information, and I say social media because 65% of Americans or more are getting their political news from social media now.
Yep.
And that is frightening when you realize that there is zero rules to what is put out there. And if we can't have a similar fact base or set of information, it's going to be really hard to bring people back together. We can start with education. Eventually, we're going to have to regulate it.
Oh, no question about it. Rochelle, if we want to find Chris's works, how do we do it?
You can find Chris pretty much everywhere, but go to his website, preferably, which is chrisrivers.com. He's got a YouTube page that I want him to tell us all about as well. And then the book is everywhere. So, Chris, please do tell, other than your website, what are other places people can go and find you and your work?
Yeah, so we're putting out information on most social media handles under Reimagining America. And I'm on YouTube, where I have a YouTube channel. I'm putting out information about how this stuff really works. And if people want to add comments and put recommendations of what they would like me to cover, I'd be more than happy to gear the content in there to what people want to see. but it's for now largely taking ideas from the book and expanding on them and teaching people where the stuff actually comes from, all with the goal of empowering people to say, do we really want that to be the way moving forward, or do we want to choose something else, all based on facts? And so if people want to join me there, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Awesome.
And by the way, we're talking with Chris Rivers. Go get his book. You shouldn't have to kill to get ahead. Yes, I said kill. Reimagining wealth, power, and belonging in America. And, you know, speaking of things, there are still, and I find this hard to believe personally, but I know it's true, and you probably have run into them on the campaign trail. There are still people who believe President Obama was born in Kenya.
Yep, I did. I have run into them.
Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. I haven't actually heard of that until yesterday. I've heard that 3 times now in 2 days that's popped up. Interesting.
And that was something that a guy, I don't know if you've heard this name, Rochelle. His name was Donald Trump, I think was his name. And
you know, I knew that guy because I used to part my hair like a madman, and my mom called me Donald Trump when I was like 14, and now he's our president. So thanks, Mom. That was not the nicest thing to tell your teenager. Love you lots.
My brother was one. He said, why did we elect somebody who was born in Kenya? He was born in Hawaii, everybody. We have proof that he was born in Hawaii. So, but there's things like that in conspiracy theories and QAnon. And Chris, how do we get a handle on some of these things that are just like pizza joints that are having kids in the basement, but there is no basement to that particular pizza joint? How do we create something that will work for everybody, and that we're all telling the truth, and be willing to call out when somebody's telling us a clear falsehood because of the clicks they get? People are outlandish. By the way, if you don't know what a click is, when you are on the internet and you do something and you get 1 million clicks, you can make money from that. So what they do is the most outlandish thing they can come up with at any given time, and there are certain people who are going to believe that. Has that been your experience, Chris?
That's absolutely been my experience, and some of these conspiracy theories are more complicated than others, but they all share a couple common threads. One, they're hard to believe that so many people can keep a secret nowadays. We do not have a good track record as human beings of keeping massive, massive secrets. They all tend to leak out at some point. And so if you believe that nobody knew about Pizzagate, or that it was just this undercover thing, and then a way to spot it is when you see people start connecting, well, if A happened, then maybe that somehow relates to B, and then C, and then D, and they have to create this like really incredibly elaborate logical chain. It may feel good to try to piece all that together and feel like you're actually connecting something that was hidden, but usually like the most common explanation is usually the right one. And the problem with conspiracy theories is they often hide the actual truth, and they actually stop us from having the change that we need to say, or that we need to see. So the QAnon conspiracy theory really started with a bunch of rich elites like using kids as slaves and drinking their blood. And that had been talked about for many, many, many years. And it's weird. And it kind of turns people off from actually diving into, I don't know, rich billionaires taking advantage of kids and then covering it up, which is all starting to come out right now with the Epstein files. And so at the end of the day, I really think the solution to conspiracy theories is, one, if you're in that world, just know that you're probably actually taking resources away from actually solving the problems you want solved in the first place. And two, if you're wondering if something's a conspiracy theory, talk to people in your real everyday life for their take on it. Because usually you may get sucked into an algorithmic rabbit hole on social media. It may feel really good because hitting your dopamine receptors and all that stuff, like all the stuff going on in your own head. The best antidote to it is talking to your significant other, talking to your friends in the flesh, not on social media, and get their take on it. Because at the end of the day, when we were all kids growing up, and it was like you would say something absolutely ridiculous that is absolutely not believable, you would just get told you're an idiot. And I think we need a little bit more of that from time to time.
Yes,
Right?
I have plenty of those moments, Chris. I tell you, every time somebody talks to me, it's like, oh my gosh, guess what? And whatever comes out of my mouth after that is like, oh my God, Rochelle, here we go again. And always talking to them is just more clearing. And really, that's what it comes down to, is each other. We just need to focus on ourselves and each other individually, one by one. What are we doing every day? How is that having an impact? And Kevin gave me some input this morning and told me something that he said before, but it clicked differently. So maybe someone hearing this, it will mean something. But he told me, wake up every morning and decide that your life is meaningless and empty. And I was like, okay. But then he said, fill it up with whatever you want. And if we woke up and realized, hey, today I get to choose to fill up my life and my mind and my surroundings with whatever I want, what would you do differently and how would you live? So thank you, Chris, for being here to give people a voice and to teach the reality of our system so that we can know that there's options to come together and be heard and lean on one another, just to make life a little bit better, even if that's day by day.
And if there's somebody that's saying, that was pretty smart of Kevin to say, I didn't make that up. I got that. I stole it from somebody else, but it's applicable. Fill your life up with whatever you want. Because your life is empty until you and nobody else does that for you. So you get to choose. Chris Rivers has been our guest. And if they want to get contact, Chris, tell us how to get a hold of you and get the book, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead. Reimagining Wealth, Power, and Belonging in America.
The best way to reach out, connect with me, is all what I have going on is captured on my website, chrisrivers.com. Easy to get to. You can find the book there. I'll put the audiobook there when it comes out. The YouTube channel links are there. And as we grow this movement, if you want to be a part of it, we'll be adding the updated information there as well.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. And we've got 10 months, I do believe, before, or maybe 9, before we have the midterms. And I'm just frightened that there's going to be actions taken between now and then that are going to retard the midterms. And will you come back? I got to talk to you about that kind of stuff too.
I will happily come back and happily talk about it.
Awesome. And we're all going to stay on the other end and pray until then.
That's it. And thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you, Rochelle. And Chris Rivers, go to chrisrivers.com and find out all about him, the movement. Sign up for it. If you believe in America at its core, at its fundamental level, that we're all equal and that we're all Americans and we all should be judged the same way, then, never mind. I got to stop. We can just go on forever. chrisrivers.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where stories inspire and voices remind us of what truly matters. May today's conversation give you hope, courage, and a reason to keep moving forward. And just remember, till next time, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got.